Sunday, January 27th, 2008, 5:30 p.m., Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, Canada. I was born in Amherst, Nova Scotia, which is very much like Bridgewater, in that it is a landlocked town in a province known for its seaside vistas. The population of Bridgewater usually hovers around 8,500, which isn't that far off from Amherst's population of around 9,000 citizens. After all, Nova Scotia is populated by fewer than 1 million people. Like Amherst, Bridgewater is a safe town. The police are more likely to spend their working days tracking down stolen bicycles and reining in drunks on Saturday nights than to find themselves investigating murders and suspicious deaths. It's not Twin Peaks, after all. Winter can be brutal in Nova Scotia. While not a part of the so-called snow belt, Nova Scotia is seldom neglected by precipitation at any time of year, and winter is generous with heavy snowfalls in that region. Once the snowplows are done clearing the streets, it's not unusual to see snowbanks reaching up to the telephone wires. It's charming during the Christmas season with that winter wonderland sensibility, but once mid-January rolls around, winter just becomes grim and burdensome. On this date, a blizzard hammered Bridgewater as it had for days, and meteorologists predicted that the township would receive 10 additional centimeters overnight. Meteorologists are household names in Nova Scotia. My grandmother was glued to the Weather Channel during winter, even though she seldom went out of the house. On this day, Penny Boudreau drove to Sobeys, which is a franchise of grocery stores in Canada. Her daughter Karissa was riding shotgun. After finding a choice parking spot, Penny parked the car. Having done so, she turned to Karissa and said, "Want to come in with me?" Karissa said no. Penny predicted this response. Mother and daughter had a troubled relationship, and that day they had been arguing heatedly. Penny was 33 years old, and Karissa had become an adolescent at 12 years old. Fitting for her age, Karissa experienced frequent mood swings. Penny seldom caught sight of her perkier moods since she moved in with her. In fact, Karissa was downright miserable about sharing living quarters with her mother and her boyfriend Vernon, having moved back in 3 months before. Karissa didn't spend much time with her mother, living a semi-hermetic existence, playing video games in her bedroom, or listening to her favorite musician, Hilary Duff. The sweet little girl Penny had once known had apparently perished. She cared about her stuffed animals. She loved attending Bible camp. She loved visiting the pet store with her mother. By this point, they barely spoke. It was the only way to keep the peace, unfortunately. Karissa enjoyed the independence that came from having parents who shared custody. Before moving in with her mother, she lived in the town of Shelburne with her father, Paul Boudreau, who had met another woman and had a new family. She enjoyed her life with him. They went camping on a regular basis, weather permitting. She was allowed to stay up until 11 p.m. The one downside was that she did not like his girlfriend. Such is the kind of complication that can arise in blended families. Karissa regularly visited her grandmother, who lived nearby. She often consulted her about what to do after a fight with her father's girlfriend. She asked her at one point if it might be a good idea to move in with her mother. Her grandmother considered it a good idea. Penny and Paul agreed to let Karissa move in with Penny, and in November 2007, She settled into Penny's apartment. Karissa had to switch schools, but it was not a problem. She made friends quickly. The difficult part of this new life for her was getting along with Vernon. The apartment was not a large one, and there were very thin walls between the two adjacent bedrooms. She would retire to bed with her earphones on. When she first moved in, she shared with Vernon her love of animals and that she had had dogs, cats, and hamsters while she was growing up. The three of them agreed to buy an aquarium and add some fish at some point. This represented the relations the two shared at the beginning, which were invariably friendly. They read the Bible together. Sometimes when he came home from work, Karissa would give him a playful fright by jumping out from a corner and shouting, "Boo!" Vernon did all he could to bond with Karissa. He gave her a teddy bear, and she adored it, naming it Paws. Vernon met her mother at the grocery store where they worked. He stocked shelves, and she was a cashier. Penny was not as permissive as Carissa's father. Karissa had to go to bed at 9:30. Karissa viewed this bedtime as more suitable for a child 4 years her junior. She would write in her journal about how stressed she felt by living in that household. She complained to her mother, but these objections only led to heated arguments. By the end of January, Vernon put pressure on Penny to resolve her differences with her daughter. Vernon wanted peace in his home, but at this point it was hard to come by. He said to Penny, "I come home and hear screaming and hollering every time I come up the stairs. You need to have a powwow. Go out, talk it out." Penny promised she would find a way to smooth things over with Karissa. January 17th, 4 p.m. Penny knocked on Carissa's door. Penny urged Karissa to get dressed so they could go out for a drive and have a talk. As they drove through the scenic Lunenburg area, Penny tried to get Karissa to open up so that they could mend their relationship. Penny suggested Karissa speak with a counselor, but Karissa preferred to pour her heart out onto the pages of her diary. As Penny turned back for the drive back home, she asked Karissa what would make her happy so that they wouldn't always be engaged in disputes. They surely couldn't keep living together if they were going to be fighting all the time. Karissa began to cry and told Penny to ignore her tantrums. She said, "After all, that's what grown-ups should do." Soon they pulled into Sobeys. When Penny left the store, she looked at her car and found that Karissa was gone. She called Vernon, who was at home, and told him. January 27th, 2008, 8:32 p.m. Sergeant Al Cunningham wasn't anticipating a lot of action, especially considering that the weather was sure to keep most of Bridgewater's citizens indoors. Police dispatcher Paula Cardinal received word that all the tranquility was about to be shattered. A woman named Penny Boudreau called in to report that her 12-year-old daughter ran away from the Sobeys parking lot. She said they had had an argument. After taking a description of the girl, Cardinal suggested to Penny that she make a list of Carissa's friends to contact. Penny and Cardinal spoke every 15 minutes that night, with Penny giving her additional information about Carissa's behavior as of late. Penny then spoke with Sergeant Cunningham, and he took down all the details she gave to Cardinal. His initial impression was that since it had been less than 3 hours since the girl disappeared, it wasn't yet time to initiate search protocols. It was also possible that she was being a melodramatic teenager, proving a point to her mother that she could get her way. Nevertheless, the winter weather was so severe, he carried out the search protocols regardless. He requested the names of Karissa's friends Penny had made. He contacted one name, but they hadn't seen her. Part of the protocol when it came to missing persons was to wait for 24 hours to elapse. But, as Sergeant Cunningham put it, when you have 25 years' experience, you get a feeling. I felt something was off. This wasn't a 17 or 18-year-old. It was a child in a hoodie with Crocs on her feet. He had the dispatcher check with local hotels to see if someone had checked in with a teenage girl. Nothing of the sort had transpired. Police searched the immediate area of the Sobeys store. A dog was involved in the effort to sniff out her remains, but given the inclement weather, such efforts were unlikely to bear fruit. Cunningham instructed his team to retrace all of Karissa's steps, including her interactions with all friends and relatives. All security footage recorded at the mall where the Sobeys was located was also going to be scrutinized. Given the weather conditions, Cunningham called off the search for the night and ordered them to resume early the next day. The following is from his report. At 0200 hours, the search was called off. Paula Comtech did a terrific job, constantly in contact with the mother and updating. Contact was made with her biological father in Shelburne and made him aware of the missing report. 0300 hours advised Penny there was nothing more we could do at this hour and update us in the AM if she heard anything. Shane called Cunningham to report that after searching the area, he hadn't found Karissa. Cunningham reassured him that she was most likely at a friend's place and would eventually come to her senses and return home. This was the summary report Cunningham wrote for the next shift. 0700 hours. We've searched all night. Checked the rear of Sobeys, in the dumpsters, along the riverbank, and even a visit to the highway parkways where the homeless people seek shelter to stay warm. Negative. Nothing is found. We exhausted all efforts. Karissa was remembered for her love of church and her ambition to one day become a veterinarian. Her friend Denise recalled that she was also intolerant of bullying. She remembered one episode when kids at school were picking on a boy and Karissa stood up for him. To quote Denise, she got so protective and had the guts to say, "Don't do that." I wouldn't stand up for him, but that's the way Karissa was. If you were in her life and she loved you, it guaranteed you that she'd be a loyal friend. Monday, January 28th, 2008, 11 a.m. A friend of Karissa's named Jennifer lived in the same apartment building, and she went up to Penny's apartment with her mother. Her mother expressed her condolences and offered to put up posters around town. Penny thanked her but declined, saying she had put up posters at the mall and other areas in town. After leaving the apartment, Jennifer's mother remarked that if Jennifer went missing, she would be combing the streets looking for her and not sitting on her duff at home. Karissa's relatives continued to fret over the situation. It didn't make sense that a girl clad in such light clothing and a pair of Crocs would run away in such conditions. Paul Boudreau has noted that Penny was once a, quote, nice lady, end quote. He went on to say that a change came over her after she broke up with his brother. He said that what he described as a, quote, heartless side of her emerged. She was susceptible to any man that paid attention to her. The previous summer, he noticed that she seemed to care less about Karissa as time went by. Paul was puzzled that Penny, a woman whose daughter had disappeared, didn't seem as distraught as one would expect. In fact, he was downright livid about her behavior at that time. Vernon complained about having a sore leg, and Penny was babying him. At one point, Paul could no longer contain his rage and left before he could confront her. Information about Karissa and her disappearance was disseminated cross-country. January 28th, 7 p.m. Penny went to the police station to be interviewed by Sergeant Cunningham. He asked her to give him a rundown of the day of Carissa's disappearance. After telling him what they had for breakfast, she said, "I can't get my daughter to talk. She is very quiet around me. My daughter is moody most of the time, and it seems like I walk on eggshells." She said Karissa spent most of that day in her room watching television. Vernon was sleeping. Penny said, "I didn't see her until noon, when she asked for Subway for lunch with a gift card she got for Christmas. So I went to get it for her. I picked up a 6-inch combo cold cut. When I came back, she just took it in her room to eat." Karissa holed up in her room and sang along to her favorite music. Penny said, "She likes to do alone things." She went on to say, "At 4 p.m., I knocked on her bedroom and told Karissa that just her and I should go for a drive and a heart-to-heart talk." They drove to Lunenburg and turned around by the animal hospital. They headed back toward town. Penny detailed how tense things were between her and Karissa in the car. "I told her I thought of getting a counselor to talk to her. She has no respect, no common sense, keeps herself isolated all of the time. Karissa got mad and said she wouldn't go. I told Karissa she had no say in this and had to go, and she had to attend the sessions. She didn't know. She complains all of the time. I feel she is two different persons. She can be sweet and then other times rude, very disrespectful, and doesn't care if she hurts other people." Penny mentioned that Karissa didn't get along with her father's girlfriend and decided to move in with Penny as a result. Then she started complaining about here. She said things like, "I hate living in that apartment. We had a house before the divorce. Carissa's no more happier living with me. I can't blame the apartment. It is just her attitude. I would describe her as a very unhappy person." Penny mentioned again how she came out of the Sobeys store and found Karissa missing, and how she called Vernon and asked him to keep a lookout for her. Penny checked with places Karissa liked to visit, but did not find her there and went home at 8 p.m. Cunningham asked her about the girl's parental situation, wanting to know which figure she respected the most. Penny said, "If I had to pick one of us, Shane is probably the person she respects, as Karissa blames me for the separation. Shane and I drifted apart. We moved from Shelburne, and Shane worked the different shift hours, and a person got lonely. I never messed around during this time, but we grew apart." He asked her for more relevant information about Karissa. She said, "Moody, depending on the day. This could be a touchy subject. I love her to death." Cunningham wanted her to describe her love for Karissa. Penny said, "She's my daughter. I would do anything for her. I just wish I could get through to her. If she was in a good mood sometimes, she would say, I love you. And on the opposite side, the situation can get ugly. Karissa has told me she hates me. I am probably only one of a few mothers that her daughter hates her. Cunningham asked Penny if Karissa was prone to self-destructive or self-harming behaviors. Penny said she wasn't aware of such tendencies. He noted that she didn't always refer to her daughter as Karissa, having once referred to her as it. Reflecting on this later, Cunningham said, the mom would say she when referring to her daughter. What bothered me is that she would never make eye contact and always looked off to the side. He finished the interview with Penny by asking, where do you think she is? Honestly, I have no idea. I figured she would come home today after she cooled down. I stayed home all day by the phone. Does Karissa care for Vernon McCumber? They get along very well. After the interview was over and Penny left, Cunningham concluded his notes by writing, if Karissa is not located, a statement analysis should be performed on this statement and/or Penny Boudreau should be polygraphed. There are some issues of the words used, like she or her instead of my daughter or Karissa. Cunningham asked Penny if he could come to the apartment and search through Karissa's belongings, including her cell phone. As he saw it, something about Penny's story just didn't add up. Cunningham and another officer found some handwritten notes, basically Karissa's diary, in her closet. The following is what they read. December 2nd, 2007. Karissa had mistakenly written 2008. I'm sad because 1. I have to go to school tomorrow. 2. I miss Shane and Tracy. 3. I have to go to bed at 9:30 instead of 11 o'clock. 4. I live in an apartment. 5. There is no room for my stuff. 6. I feel crowded. 7. End of story. My life sucks until we live in a house. I'm mad because 1. Mom is engaged to Vernon. 2. Mom made me move here. 3. Mom broke up with Shane. 4. I want a bigger room. 5. I don't like Vernon living with us. The end. My life is ruined. By Karissa, December 3rd, 2008. I'm stressed because 1. I have to do a speech tomorrow. 2. I have peer mediating training tomorrow as well. 3. Mom took away my TV because I didn't tell her where I was. 4. I can't beat my speed stacking record. 5. I am reading too many books at once. It's confusing. 6. End of story. My life is stressful. By Karissa. Of these, Cunningham wrote, these notes appear to be written by a very unhappy person who was stressed out with her personal problems. January 29th. At a press conference, Penny addressed the fourth wall. I don't know where you are. Just come home or call or something. Karissa, we love you. Your grandparents are looking for you. We are looking for you. Everyone is. So just come home or call or something. We're all worried. We just want you home safe. It's not like we're going to get mad. We just want you home safe. Please. Paul was also part of the panel and said, Karissa, we just want you to come home, honey. Just come home. They opened up to questions. A reporter asked, what must this be like for you as a mother? Penny said, it's pure hell. Not knowing where your kid is, it's horrible. One Halifax reporter didn't handle the subject matter as delicately. What's most disturbing to us is that she was dressed inappropriately for the weather. Here on the South Shore, the weather conditions were inclement at best. Police Chief Scott Feener was skeptical about the runaway hypothesis, saying, "At this time of year, in a blinding snowstorm, she's likely not just hanging around somewhere. Usually, we can find someone in town in a couple of days if they are hiding or missing." A man driving along William Head Road saw a small glimpse of color in the snow that was not white. He stopped his truck. It looked like a pink Croc shoe, and a small one. He suddenly remembered hearing a bulletin on the radio about a girl who had gone missing that had been wearing pink Crocs. Knowing better than to disturb a potential crime scene, he drove to the Bridgewater Police Department to report his discovery. When the police showed up, they found the Croc had been thrown atop the snowbank rather than buried. Their dog went sniffing for Karissa's remains in the surrounding area, but turned up nothing. All police who had seen a picture of the Croc on the snowbank noted that it seemed out of place. Penny recognized it as the kind Karissa was wearing, though aside from that, she was only concerned that it would be found in such an oddly random area. In analyzing Penny's interview at the police station, Cunningham considered her characterizing the dispatcher's tasks as a, quote, problem, end quote, that she handled very well to be a red flag. January 30th. Penny was interviewed by Constable Trevor Mitchell. He started with, "We're investigating the disappearance of your daughter, Karissa, and I understand you provided a written statement to Sergeant Al Cunningham on Monday. It's Wednesday now, so sometimes things change a bit in your memory, and you'll think of details that you didn't think of at the time." Penny said, "I want you to go back to Sunday. Take your time, stay cool, calm, and relaxed, and tell me everything that happened. Everything you say is very, very important, so take your time. Just go back, close your eyes. We've got all day." I don't know what time we got up, maybe around 9 or 10. Vernon was still sleeping, so we let him sleep in, and me and her had breakfast. Al wanted me to know all these things about what we ate. I think she had a peanut butter sandwich, and I had an egg. We talked a little bit, but the girl doesn't talk a lot, especially in the morning, and she wanted to know if she could go back in her room. And I said, "Well, if that's what you want to do." She came back out again close to lunchtime, and she was hungry. She wanted to know what we were having, and I said, "I don't know." She had a Subway card from Christmas, so she wanted to know if I would get her a sub. So I said, "Sure," and ran and got her a sub and brought it back to the apartment. She took it to her room to eat it alone. She always wanted to be alone. Take your time, Penny. Around 4 o'clock, I think it was, I knocked on her bedroom door and asked her if she wanted to go for a drive with me, that I wanted to talk with her, and she said okay. She got dressed, and we probably left a few minutes later. I had no direction or anywhere we should go. I just was driving slow and aimlessly. I just wanted her to talk where she couldn't run off and shut the door. You know, get away and have a mother-daughter heart-to-heart. We had thought about getting her a counselor because she would not talk. And when she does, it's to snap or be mean. It's very stressful to live in a house where everybody's on eggshells. You know, you're scared they're going to snap or whatever. We drove around and I ended up in Lunenburg and I turned around at the animal hospital. We came back. I wandered around town, still driving and talking. She's just so sad. I know she blames me for the divorce, but I mean, that's typical for kids. I just kept asking her what would make her happy. I never thought she would disappear. I never thought there would be no sign of her. We ended up at Sobeys, and I wanted to get some juice before I went home. And she didn't want to come in. I was only in there for a few minutes. And when I came out, she was gone. So I didn't panic at first. I figured, after the talk, she wanted to cool off. So I drove around town hoping to see her. I drove around and around. I didn't see her. I went home to wait. Maybe she may have already been at somebody's house. Me and Vernon waited an hour and no sign of her. So we called here, and it was Paula that answered, and she said, "Stay calm until 10 p.m. Then call her friends." That's what I did, and Paula did a lot of calling for me, and she was really good, courteous yesterday. Mitchell said, Penny went on. I think she was awesome. I don't know if anybody else recognized how awesome she is. He said, she is. She kept me sane that first night. I'll put it that way. We walked ourselves physically along the banks of the river and through the woods, and I don't know what else I can do. I'm at a loss. I was the last one with her, so I feel responsible. Somebody asked me the other day if maybe she pre-planned something. She had nobody to take her out that day. I just asked her to go for a drive. It's a complete mystery. I don't know what more I can tell you. I just sat up all night trying to rack my brain as to what I could think of that I missed. I never experienced anything like this, ever. I honestly have no idea. Okay, let's get back to the Sobeys parking lot. Just go back in your mind, and take your time. Close your eyes and think when you pulled in the Sobeys parking lot. Everything you said and everything she said. Well, we both weren't talking a whole lot because we were on our way home and nobody knew what they wanted to do, and I told her she was getting a counselor. She didn't want it, but I said, well, you gotta talk to somebody. It's not healthy to live isolated and moody. And she said, well, fine, whatever. We were parked very close to the door, and I could see the car from the checkout. That's when I could tell I first noticed she wasn't there, because I was watching the car, and the cashier was ringing in my stuff. Then I used the payphone. I remember saying, asking her if she wanted to come in, and she goes, no, I don't like shopping. I don't want nothing to do with going in with you. Mitchell probed about the conversation in the car. Penny said, I didn't say a whole lot when we started out. I just told her I wanted to talk about her behavior and the fact she had no respect for anybody else in the house. It's all about her, and that's little kid's attitude sometimes. But she's always been like that from the time she was little. I said, what can I do to make you happy? She got frustrated and started crying, and she blamed me. I said, well, how come you were okay with Shane being happy? That's my ex-husband, and he's got a girlfriend, and that's okay, and you're not mad at him for being happy. And she blamed me. She felt He had a right to be happy, and I didn't, because I caused the divorce. I said, that's not true. Everybody has the right to be happy, and it takes more than one to cause a divorce. And I just left that alone. I said, would she be happier living with her real dad again? Because she seemed happier. And she said no, because she didn't like his girlfriend. And I'm like, well, you can't have everything. I said, what do you want me to do to try and make things better for you? And she said, you have no business talking to me. Don't look at me. Just leave me alone. That'll make me happy. I said, I can't live in a house where people are stuck and constantly yelling at you, raging at you. And she said, just ignore my rages. And I said, you can't live like that. And she said, well, that's what grown-ups should do. She just kept insisting she wasn't happy, but she didn't know what would make her happy. I don't know. We were both at a loss what to do. Where were you? We're just driving slowly. We meandered around town some more. I stopped in the shipyards to talk and just sit still. She said, I'm going to tell everybody you're being mean to me. And I said, I'm not being mean to you. I'm just trying to reach you because you're hurt and you're sad. And she said it would be better if she made people not like me. And she said somebody would take her and make her happy. I said, Christ, if anyone can make you happy, it'd be your family. And she said nobody wanted her. I said, we've all tried. Penny admitted to reading Carissa's diaries. She was surprised that Karissa would want a boyfriend at 12 years old. She said, why would you desperately need a boyfriend at 12? I mean, it's really sad she mentioned crying herself to sleep and how she hated living in this place and hated this person. Hardly anything in there was positive. It really overwhelmed me. Take your time. I know. It's like I didn't even know her. Later, the officers noted how Penny addressed Karissa in the video recording during her interview at the police station, even though the recording would not be seen by Karissa. Mitchell asked her about Vernon. She said, we've been together since probably summer, late spring, but we were friends for several years. I've known him. We worked together. Was Vernon at the apartment when you guys left? He had been up for a little because he worked 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays, so he was pretty tired, and he had the day off, so he was asleep. He said he knew I wanted to have a talk with my daughter, like a heart-to-heart with her, because he knew how difficult it was living together. She detailed what she told Vernon over the phone after finding Karissa missing. I told him she wasn't with me and for him to keep an eye out for her to come home because she didn't have any keys, so she'd have to buzz to get in. Explaining why she waited until Monday to tell her father that Karissa had disappeared, Penny said, I just kept hoping that she would come home through the night, and I didn't want to worry them fellows, so I called first thing Monday. Reflecting on the disappearance itself, she said, I've been trying to pick my brain, thinking maybe she had an older boyfriend. I didn't even know she even thought of boys or had crushes until I read her notebooks. I feel like I didn't even know her. I pretty much didn't, because she wouldn't open up. It's such a sad way to find out things that trouble your kid, like you'd think they'd come to you. Mitchell said, if you were to make one good guess, where do you think she would be? I thought she'd be with my ex-husband, Shane, because she liked being with him. How about I get you out of here? I'm just so lost. I just want to help her so much. I mean, if we find her, she's in trouble for what she's done, that's for sure. When reviewing the interview after Penny's departure, the officers found the image of her appealing to Karissa directly strange and chilling. It gave them the impression that she wasn't entirely forthcoming. Vernon McCumber was interviewed by police. He had a criminal record complete with a history of violence and mental illness. Police had to at least rule him out. Vernon opened with, "Okay, Trevor, it's just been hell. I don't know what to do. I want to be there for Penny, but my God, it's horrible." Mitchell asked him to go through the events of the day of Carissa's disappearance. Vernon said, "Okay, Sunday began by getting up around 10. They usually let me sleep because, I get different shifts where I work Saturday too. So I got up and I knew Penny was going to have a talk, right? About, because we were really worried about Karissa. But I think she just seemed very frustrated at times. Like, never mean to me or anything, but just with her mom. I'm not the bad guy, right? But it seemed like she had to talk to her about her attitude to get her some help or something, right? To talk to somebody. She didn't want to talk to us, right? We just knew her attitude was getting, bad. We were concerned. I said, I'll get up. I had a tall Milwaukee in the fridge, and I said, "Do you guys want me to go with you?" And she said no. She just wanted a one-on-one with her without her hollering, because they do get hollering like they will. She'll holler and she just don't want to talk. She would just holler first and then run to her room. I don't know what time it was when they left, and I had my beer and I said, "I'm going to lay down." It might have been later because I can't remember how late it was when they left in the afternoon. Then all of it started out normal. Karissa come out of her room and we talked, and she showed me her knee socks. When she left, she said, "Do you like my socks?" And I said, "Yeah, I think they're cool." She was a sweet kid. I mean, she is a good kid. I was just worried about her welfare. Kids shouldn't be trouble when they're young, right? You know what I mean? The fact that he originally referred to her in the past tense when characterizing her as a good kid struck the police as a red flag. It was also strange that he would describe her as happy after having lived in the same home where Karissa was constantly upset and fighting with their mother. He described how the events went down when Penny contacted him to tell him about Carissa's disappearance. "I'm laying down. I was never a phone person, anyway. I didn't know she was trying to get hold of me. I heard the phone ring several times, and I just laid back down and drifted off to sleep, and I guess she came. Well, I guess it was around 5:30 or so, and I was still in bed, and Penny's frantic. Of course, she panics, 'cause she loved her daughter. I mean, that's all I ever do is love her daughter, right? Always so kind with her and don't want to get her upset, right? Loved. Again, speaking in the past tense. Vernon went on. She come in upset. She said Karissa had jumped out of the car and took off. And I said, "Well, just calm down now. Tell me exactly." I said, "Don't panic. It's just that she probably went out to vent. That's what I did when I was a kid and got mad at my parents. I went outside playing. I told her, don't panic. She might be on her way home now, 'cause it's only within half an hour. I didn't know something was up. If I'd have known, I would have went with them. I mean, I could have stayed in the car or something. So anyway, I said, well, we're going to wait till about 6:30 and or 6 o'clock. I'm not quite sure, but I said, we're going to wait. At 7 o'clock, we're calling the police. We've got to get them out there looking for her. 'Cause, she wasn't dressed. She only had on socks and normal shoes. The girl's been through a divorce, and it must affect the child, right? I don't want her to think I was coming in trying to take over Shane's spot or her dad's spot. She wasn't happy. She didn't want to stay with her dad no more, and of course, I'm going to let her, come back with us. Penny's her mom, and I love her too. There was not much more I can tell you. A guy deals with it. Later I got drunk, and geez, I drank myself into a stupor. I don't know what to do. I can't go somewhere to beat someone up. I got drunk. That's all. I looked everywhere. Penny did most of the looking. She went back and forth before we called the cops. I couldn't let her go out like that. I had to do something. I wanted to find her too. I think the world of her. Vernon said he took to the streets and saw Shane Boudreau as he did so. When he saw no signs of Karissa, he drove back home. He said he and Karissa had a good relationship, that when Penny wasn't home, he might take Karissa to McDonald's or to get a soft drink elsewhere. Of her, he said, she wasn't a bad kid always, you know what I mean? She was never like that. I always tried to be there and not push myself on her, let her come to me, sort of thing. She could come to me on her own terms. Mitchell. So let's get back to Sunday. Vernon, yes. Mitchell, you're off. You're not working Sunday. Not working Sunday, no. What time did you get up? I get up. It must have been around 10. I did get up and we were sitting around, so I must have been up for a couple of hours. So you were up, Pen's up. Carissa's up and everything's normal. She'd come out and talk and she'd get something to eat. And we went. Now, heck, wait now. I'm trying to think, was that Sunday? We got the sub she wanted and, yeah, she ate it. So a couple of hours later, she said, oh well, I'm going to take her for a drive. I just want to talk to her. I said, well, that's fine, Do what you got to do, right? And said, if you want me to go with you, I will. But she said no. Vernon said Penny told him she didn't want anybody else in the apartment to hear her discussion with Karissa. He repeated the part about how he later heard the phone ringing, which turned out to be Penny, but he ignored it and went to sleep. I tell you, my friend, this is just a nightmare. It's like a bad dream, really. I had no idea she was so troubled. It just seemed like she was bothered, different than other kids. I never been around a girl kid, you know what I mean? As far as understanding how they behave. I know how a boy behaves. I had a boy myself, right? And I was a kid once. But girls are completely different, I'm told, right? Mitchell, I don't have daughters. So, when you went to look for her, who were you with? Penny? Vernon. I went by myself when I went to look for her because Penny wanted to stay home in case she came. She wouldn't leave, right? And that was after we called the police. Penny was really devastated. She loves her, man. Penny really loves her daughter. She's just so good to her. That's all she cares about right now is her baby. So it hurt her so bad. She missed her so much when she moved away. It was just horrible. It broke my heart to see Penny missing her daughter like that, right? The officers noted that Vernon became increasingly rattled throughout the interview. Despite his claims that he had an excellent rapport with Karissa, she described a troubled relationship between the two in her journals. He was far more unsettled during questioning than Penny. January 31st, 9:45 a.m. The town of Bridgewater was on edge, not just out of concern for the fate of Karissa Boudreau, but parents and children were worried that a similar fate, whatever it was, would befall any of the rest of the town's children. Other communities called the dispatcher with tips. All available resources were being employed to find the girl. A friend of Penny's noted that she didn't sound as upset as you would expect a mother to feel after her daughter goes missing. A woman named Danielle Hines worked at the same grocery store as Penny and Vernon. She disclosed to police one day that during a conversation with Vernon, amid a smoke break, he disclosed to her that Karissa was getting in the way of his relationship with Penny. He also said that something needed to happen, though he didn't specify. Penny and Vernon gave conflicting stories about their relations with Karissa. In her journals, Karissa wrote about feeling tormented and depressed about the situation. She also wrote about feeling trapped. They all felt trapped, actually. February 9th, 11:35 a.m. Scott Feener received a call from dispatch about the most promising lead yet. A possible corpse had been found under the snow. They didn't yet know if it was Karissa Boudreau, but they couldn't let this tip go unchecked. The location was less than 2 kilometers away from the apartment she lived in with Penny and Vernon. A woman called in to say that her 9-year-old son was relieving himself in the snow when he stumbled upon what appeared to be a body. He walked into a thicket of trees that afforded him the privacy he needed so that passing motorists wouldn't see him doing his business. Then his parents heard him scream. His parents got out of their car and rushed to the boy to see what was wrong. When they looked downhill, they saw what appeared to be frozen toes sticking up from the snow. They waved down the next driver so that they could contact the police via their cell phone. Police descended on the scene and kept the public at bay. The officers who had a closer look saw that the body and face were buried in snow, but the toes were indeed exposed. Commenting on this sight, Sergeant Scott Feener said, "It was a fluke of nature. The angle the boy was looking down, he could see frozen toes sticking out of the snow. Had he been looking the other way, he would have seen nothing but snow." A cashier who knew Penny a little wished her condolences, as it appeared that Karissa had been found. Penny thanked her and said she was heading home to see if anybody had called. The cashier noted that she came across as nonchalant about the whole thing. Forensics officers cleared ice and snow off the body, and yet it was still difficult just to tell what gender the person was. There was no indication in the snow that there was a scuffle, which led to the theory that the person was murdered elsewhere. This is the official forensics report verbatim. The area had been checked for impressions in the snow that might indicate this person had struggled up the hill from the river to this point, but none were noted. There was a broken branch below where the body was located. As the body was uncovered, it was photographed. A pink shirt was pulled up over the stomach, but still covered the breast area. A pair of Winnie the Pooh bear panties had been partially pulled down above the knees. The slim left leg was naked, while blue jeans covered the right leg. A bare left foot stuck up solid. A brown striped sock covered the right foot. Young Caucasian female, roughly 5 feet 4 inches tall, long brown hair. The body appeared to have been deliberately splayed. It had been placed there. The body had not gone into rigor mortis, and the girl did not die at the site. It was more likely the body was moved post-mortem and discarded there. There were swollen, raised ligature marks on her neck. One of her socks was in her pocket. The pathologist said at one point, "Someone is trying to make us think this girl was raped. I'm not sure that's true." Police interviewed a man named Adam Collins, who worked at the same store as Penny and Vernon. He recalled a conversation he had with Vernon about how his 9-year-old son had to be coaxed into taking out the garbage. Collins went on, "But what kid didn't, right?" Vernon replied he was having discipline problems at his home. At times he wished he could, quote, "just throw her in the river," end quote. A few minutes later, Vernon stated he shouldn't have said that, and he would feel bad if anything happened to Karissa. The investigation was no longer just that of a missing person. It was now investigated as a homicide. Neighbors complained to police about a domestic disturbance in the apartment of Penny and Vernon. The police took the following report based on this incident. Occupants of the apartment below heard Vernon Macomber was agitated and throwing things around. He and Boudreau were going back and forth in the apartment. Macomber was telling her that he was leaving her. They went into the bathroom, and water was running, and it sounded like Boudreau was in the tub. He was saying over and over again, "Pen, how could you do this? How could you do this?" And that he was disgusted with her. Then Macomber was saying, Pen, come on, speak, Pen. How could you do this? I don't understand. You got me involved." The neighbor said everything went quiet after Vernon threatened to leave. She also noted that she hadn't heard them have such skirmishes before Karissa disappeared. The complainant said she had never seen that side of Vernon, that he had always been mild-mannered and polite with her. Penny, on the other hand, always seemed to be scowling. Neighbors also mentioned the sounds of partying after Karissa's disappearance, loud music and other sounds that you would associate with people who might be celebrating something. A reenactment of the disappearance was done with Penny's full cooperation. In a report about her behavior and disposition, an officer wrote, "Penny showed no emotion when seeing the picture. At no time during the reenactment did Penny show concern or ask about the investigation. She did not ask about the body on King Street or when the identity would be done. At times, Penny would laugh. I dropped Penny off at her apartment and returned to Bridgewater Police Station." February 11th, Scott Saunders, neighbor of Penny Boudreau and Vernon Macomber, overheard Macomber talking to someone on the phone in distressed tones. The following are quotes he gave to a 911 operator. "Bubby, they are coming to get me. Get me out of here, Bubby. She didn't want her kid. Fuck life. I'm gonna get far, far away. She fucking killed her kid. I know it. She did it. I wasn't there. She fucking did it. I want rid of her and her aunt. She fucking did it, Bubby. She fucking did it to her own daughter. I got to get out of here. I don't give a fuck about her or her kid." This buttressed the police's theory that Penny and Vernon were the prime suspects in the murder of Karissa Boudreau. During a more in-depth autopsy, no evidence of sexual assault was found. The cause of death was reaffirmed as asphyxia from strangulation. Through dental records, the body was confirmed as being that of Karissa Boudreau. Police and other legal authorities began the process of laying charges and drawing up arrest warrants so that Penny Boudreau and Vernon Macomber could be arrested and investigated. February 14th, 2008. Such would be the least romantic Valentine's Day of Penny Boudreau's life, for the police called her into the station to provide an update on their findings at the La Havre River, where they found Carissa's remains. They said it was such a sensitive topic, they couldn't discuss it over the phone. At 9:55 a.m., Penny Boudreau was read her charter rights and was advised to get a lawyer. Penny spoke with a public defender, but then with a higher caliber attorney from Halifax. She spoke with him for 3 hours before she underwent questioning. Down the hall, Vernon was advised of his rights as he was detained. Meanwhile, warrants to search Penny and Vernon's apartment as well as her car were approved. Penny and Vernon were kept in holding cells. Undercover officers would interact with them in hopes of getting confessions. During interrogation, Vernon maintained that he didn't know how Karissa was killed and emphasized that he wasn't involved. Penny stonewalled her interviewer. She didn't offer any denials when asked if she killed her daughter, but didn't cop to it either. She also didn't ask how Karissa died. During the police search of the apartment, an insight into Penny's feelings for Vernon was gleaned from the following letter. All I know is that I love you both, but you come first. Vernon, please open your mind, eyes, and heart to me. And Karissa, as you've got it made. I worry sometimes that you don't want to do things with the three of us. You are the most important person or thing in the world to me. You are my whole world. My sole purpose for living is to build a life and memories with you. There are people in the world who try to destroy others. You may think you can trust them, but I can tell you right now that there are only 3 that you can trust: God, yourself, and me. Vernon proposed to Penny on December 18th, 2007, and she more than gladly accepted. 6 days before Carissa's disappearance, Penny wrote this to Vernon as she felt he had become distant. I get scared sometimes that he is going to walk out on this relationship, and that would kill me. I love him more than life itself. He's been down because he doesn't have much work, but he's not going to find a better job in bed. I miss his laughter, his playfulness, our talks, our walks, his touch, doing things as a family. I pray to God to help bring him back to me. I need him, want him, and love him. I love you to no end, Vernon, and won't stop trying to give you a better life. You are my everything, and being with you is all that matters. Despite the maneuver of having undercover officers interact with Penny and Vernon, there was still not enough evidence to charge them, so they were released on February 15th. February 25th. A man looking through a garbage bin for recyclable materials he could exchange for cash spotted some items of interest: a crock without a mate, a black hoodie, a black vest. The man reported his findings to the police. The aforementioned items were reported as comprising most of Karissa's wardrobe on the day of her disappearance. Penny and Vernon's co-workers were troubled by stories of Penny and Vernon partying after Karissa's disappearance and murder. Penny also hadn't visited any of the memorial sites that were set up in tribute to Karissa by members of the community. Penny's behavior was certainly unbecoming for a mother whose daughter was murdered in cold blood. The same day Karissa's clothing was found in the dumpster, Penny was taken to hospital after attempting to commit suicide by swallowing an overdose of pills. An undercover team posing as an organized crime syndicate befriended Vernon as they employed him. The real purpose was to get him to confess to the murder of Karissa Boudreau, if he was in fact guilty. This is the text of the official report filed by the officers. The undercover team believed that Vernon Macomber neither assisted Penny Boudreau in the homicide, nor does he have knowledge of Penny having committed the murder. The undercover team wants to refocus the undercover operation on Penny Boudreau and use their credibility with Vernon Macomber to introduce her to the organization. Penny got involved in the same criminal scheme and was mentored and befriended by a woman she knew as Karen. One day they had a conversation in which Penny described the stabbing of a 14-year-old girl. She concluded by saying, "Girls are worse than boys and more violent." Karen documented the following. Penny told UC, undercover, that she would like to burn the evidence locker in Chester RCMP detachment, or blow it up somehow. Penny had been involved in the same fictitious criminal syndicate as Vernon. She had become a courier of allegedly stolen goods, like him. The man known to her and Vernon as the head of the organization, the Mr. Big, if you will, claimed to have connections to corrupt cops and promised to make her difficulties with the investigation into Karissa's death go away. That is, if she opened up about what all had transpired that led to the girl's disappearance and death. Unbeknownst to Penny at the time, she was being recorded and police were listening and watching in another hotel room. This she disclosed without much provocation. She admitted that she was not only deeply in love with Vernon, but was scared half to death of being alone, what a psychologist would dub anuptophobia, or the fear of being single. She said that most of the issues that arose in her relationship with Vernon were caused, to some degree, by Karissa. She went on to say that Vernon gave her an ultimatum: choose him or Karissa. This marked the first time the officers heard of the ultimatum. Even Vernon hadn't admitted to such a thing. Throughout the following hour, Penny detailed the events of January 27th, and this was a new version of her story. Sometime between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, she departed to take Karissa for a round-trip drive to the town of Lunenburg. The commute took 40 minutes. They spent the non-commuting time talking, and it soon grew into a heated argument, which she noted had, quote, gotten out of hand, end quote. She described them both as, quote, pissed off, end quote, at the time. She went on to say she did, as she saw it, what she had to do, which consisted of driving to the Sobeys parking lot at 5:30 p.m. After buying juice and bacon, she called Vernon to tell him that Karissa wasn't in the car when she left the store. He hadn't answered the phone, so she left voicemail. She put the groceries in the trunk of the car. As she did, she grabbed a length of beige twine and put it in her parka pocket. She had decided at this point to kill her daughter, who was still alive and still in the car. It was true that Karissa wanted to get out of the car. Granting this request, Penny waited until dark and drove to William Head Road. She chose this location because it was secluded and heavily forested, promising few, if any, witnesses. Karissa asked to be let out once again. Penny told her that if she wanted to get out, she should get out. Penny said she wasn't about to let Karissa run back to town and tell everyone what a terrible mother she was. Penny and Karissa both got out of the car. Penny tried to grab Karissa, but the ground was too slippery to get a grip, so she tackled her. Karissa fell and landed on her back. The only thing Karissa said to Penny at that juncture was, "Mommy, don't." According to Penny, Karissa was frightened. This wasn't enough to elicit empathy from Penny. She pinned her daughter to the ground with her knee. Karissa wasn't able to fight back because Penny pinned her arms to the ground. At this point, mother and daughter were face to face. Penny wrapped the twine around Karissa's throat and pulled end over end in an X formation with as much strength as she could muster, until Karissa was no longer breathing. As she asphyxiated, Karissa dug into the snow in a last-ditch attempt to survive. Karissa's eyes were bulging. Her tongue was stuck between her teeth. She was foaming at the mouth and drooling. She began heaving for air. Within seconds, Karissa went limp. Karissa Boudreau was dead. Penny showed no sign of remorse or any other emotion throughout her retelling of the story. She said she dragged Karissa's body back to the car. She placed her in a heap on the floor of the passenger side. She drove around Bridgewater, trying to figure out what to do next. She drove to a spot just outside of town, known as the Turnaround. She dragged her to the La Havre River, leaving her pants slightly down and one of her socks off. She removed her hoodie and vest, leaving her woefully unprepared for winter weather, in hopes that it would appear that she was sexually assaulted, or assaulted in some other way. She sent her rolling down a snowbank. Karissa hit trees on the way down. It was a spot where snow was sure to accumulate during the blizzard. With that, Penny turned and left. From there, she drove around town, discarding the articles of Karissa's clothing she hadn't left at the scene of the crime, in dumpsters. The next part of the story was more of a match for the one she originally gave police, about how she took to the streets with Vernon to search frantically for Karissa. She also pointed out that the thought of losing Vernon was far more painful than the notion of losing Karissa. RCMP Corporal John Elliott was one of the undercover officers listening in. He recalled how her confession made him and the other officers feel. We heard Penny, in her own words, say that she murdered her own daughter. It was surreal. We were very happy but very sad and looked at each other. There were tears in our eyes. We had solved it, We were going to get the family some justice. Penny still didn't suspect that the supposed crime boss she was talking to was, in fact, a hidden agent of the law. She was on a roll. She even, upon request, demonstrated how she pinned Karissa to the ground. Following this, he asked her to write down all the details of her story so that he could use them as a reference in the future. She obliged. One of the other officers in the adjacent room vomited. To quote him, known as Steve to Penny and Vernon, Penny was cold, calculating, and had no soul. Everything was about herself. She was so happy, it's like she would never be held accountable for it. There was no feeling and no remorse. I've dealt with a lot of messed up people, but nothing like this. Finally, Mr. Big asked her to take him to the scene where she killed Karissa and demonstrate through a play-by-play reenactment how she carried out the murder. Again, Penny agreed to play this morbid game of charades. She was recorded on video with a hidden camera. Interestingly, during the commute, she told Mr. Big not to tell Vernon what she had done. Mr. Big asked for one more thing, the jacket Penny was wearing during the murder. She passed it over to him like a bowl of after-dinner minutes. As she saw it, this represented the last of her moments being haunted by the murder investigation. Her life as a free woman could thenceforth be measured in minutes. June 13th, Penny was in a Costco parking lot with an undercover agent posing as a criminal associate when she was taken into custody by undercover RCMP officers. June 14th, Penny was interrogated at the RCMP detachment in Lunenburg, not far from where the murder happened. She denied any involvement. An officer brought a laptop into the room, which contained the video that was shot of her confessing to the murder in the hotel room. Penny was shaken. She cried, with her tears related not to the death of her daughter, but to her pending future behind bars. June 16th, Penny Boudreau was charged with first-degree murder and was denied bail. A crowd had assembled outside the court building, and they yelled jeers at her, like child killer and murderer. January 2009, Penny agreed to a plea deal wherein she pled guilty to second-degree murder. She was given a life sentence. She will be eligible to apply for parole only after serving 20 years. Due to her status as a child killer, she was not popular in jail and prison, and was usually segregated from other inmates. As for the impact of the murder on Vernon Macomber, he said Karissa made him laugh and that her death left him heartbroken. He has struggled to obtain employment due to his connection to the case, despite his innocence. He had a history of alcoholism, and the case caused a significant relapse. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.